Roman dodecahedron is remarkable and unusual, because there's not many more than 100 known to exist.
In the cold soil of Britain's countryside, beneath centuries of accumulated earth and institutional neglect, lies an object so profoundly anomalous that mainstream archaeology has spent nearly 300 years pretending it doesn't matter. The Roman dodecahedron, a geometric impossibility, a Bronze Age artifact that shouldn't exist in Roman hands. And when the latest discovery emerged in 2023, sealed in ritual context with traces of blood and ceremonial plants, the academic establishment didn't celebrate this breakthrough. They tried to bury it. Because this object, friends, isn't just a curiosity. It's evidence of a knowledge system that predates Rome, that threatened the empire's spiritual monopoly, and that reveals a truth so uncomfortable that even today, scholars would rather dismiss it than confront what it means. The geographic anomaly. Let me start with a question that should trouble anyone who thinks critically about the past. Why do we find over 130 of these intricate bronze objects scattered across the remote frontiers of the Roman Empire, in Gaul, in Germania, in the windswept edges of Britannia, but not a single authenticated example from Rome itself? Not in the Forum, not in Pompeii, not in any of the heartland cities where Roman civilization supposedly flourished. This isn't a minor gap in the archaeological record. This is a screaming anomaly that conventional scholars have conveniently ignored for 3 centuries. The distribution pattern tells us something profound. These dodecahedrons cluster in regions that Rome conquered relatively late, territories where Celtic and Germanic cultures had deep roots, where the old ways persisted beneath the veneer of Roman administration. The Rhineland, northern Gaul, southern Britain. These weren't the cosmopolitan centers of empire. These were liminal zones, borderlands where Roman authority was negotiated rather than absolute, where indigenous practices survived in the shadows. And here's what truly fascinates me. Not one dodecahedron has ever been found in a context that suggests Roman manufacture or Roman use. No workshops, no mentions in any Roman text, and believe me, the Romans documented everything from their sewage systems to their military sock supplies. The silence is deafening. It's as if these objects existed in a parallel cultural reality, invisible to official Roman society, yet profoundly important to the people who actually possessed them. The failed explanations. Now, whenever archaeology encounters something it cannot easily categorize, it reaches for the mundane, the prosaic, the safe explanation that requires no radical rethinking of established narratives. And the dodecahedron has collected these boring theories like barnacles on a ship's hull. Knitting tools. This is perhaps the most insulting suggestion ever advanced by academic archaeology. The idea that sophisticated Bronze Age metalworkers, people who could create objects of stunning geometric precision, would go to the enormous effort of casting these complex forms just to help Roman matrons make socks. Never mind that the holes are different sizes, irregularly spaced, and would create the most impractical knitting device imaginable. Never mind that not a single thread, fiber, or textile fragment has ever been found in association with a dodecahedron. The theory persists because it's comfortable, domestic, trivial. It makes the anomaly disappear. Then there's the candle holder hypothesis, equally absurd. These objects are too small, too unstable, and too valuable to serve as simple lighting implements. Some have proposed they were used for calibrating water pipes or as surveying instruments, rangefinders for military engineers. But again, where is the evidence? Where are the comparable tools? Where are the Roman manuals describing their use? The silence continues. What all these theories share is a desperate need to normalize the dodecahedron, to force it into a category that doesn't challenge our understanding of Roman material culture. But the object resists. Its very form, a perfect dodecahedron with 12 pentagonal faces, speaks to a mathematical and geometric sophistication that seems utterly unnecessary for any utilitarian purpose. This is sacred geometry. This is the language of cosmology, of mapping the relationship between earthly and celestial realms. And that's precisely what makes the academic establishment so uncomfortable. The Norton Disney discovery. Everything changed in 2023 with a discovery that should have rewritten the textbooks. In the quiet Lincolnshire village of Norton Disney, amateur metal detectorists working on private land encountered something unprecedented. A dodecahedron, yes, but this one wasn't a random field find. It was in sealed archaeological context, buried deliberately in a small pit with accompanying ritual materials that transformed understanding of these objects. The pit itself was carefully constructed, lined with clay and sealed with a capstone. Inside, arranged with obvious intentionality, were the remains of ceremonial plants. Mugwort, a powerful hallucinogenic herb sacred to pre-Roman Celtic religious practices. Yarrow, associated with divination and communication with the spirit world, and traces of something darker. Residue analysis revealed organic compounds consistent with human blood, deliberately applied to the dodecahedron surface in a pattern that suggested repeated ritual use. This wasn't casual deposition. This was a votive offering, a sacred burial that linked the dodecahedron directly to indigenous religious practices that Rome officially suppressed. The metallurgical tests revealed something equally startling. The bronze composition didn't match standard Roman alloy formulas. Instead, the metal showed trace elements and ratios more consistent with earlier Bronze Age Celtic metalworking traditions, suggesting these objects were either ancient heirlooms or were deliberately manufactured using pre-Roman techniques even during the Roman period. The implications are staggering. We're looking at material evidence of a persistent underground religious tradition, a mystery cult that preserved ancient knowledge and practices beneath the surface of Roman Britain. The dodecahedron emerges not as a tool or toy, but as a ritual instrument, possibly used in ceremonies involving altered states of consciousness, divination, or communication with ancestral spirits. The 2025 controversy, and then came 2025, when leaked preliminary findings from ongoing research in Belgium sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Teams examining dodecahedrons in museum collections using advanced imaging techniques discovered something that had been hiding in plain sight. Microscopic analysis revealed residues in the internal cavities and around the circular holes that pointed to a specific, repeatable pattern of use. The residues contained not just blood, but bone fragments. Human bone fragments, processed and burned, combined with plant alkaloids and mineral compounds in proportions that matched descriptions from fragmentary classical sources describing Celtic necrotic rites. Ceremonies designed to pierce the veil between the living and the dead. The dodecahedrons, it appears, functioned as focal points for these rituals, possibly as containers or conduits through which the boundary between worlds could be traversed. The geometric form itself now takes on profound significance. 12 pentagonal faces, each representing a gateway, each oriented according to precise astronomical alignments. The varying hole sizes corresponding not to random manufacture, but to specific celestial bodies, allowing the object to function as both calendar and cosmological map. This is the same sophisticated astronomical knowledge we find encoded in stone circles, in burial mounds, in the alignments of sacred sites across prehistoric Europe. What terrifies the establishment is the continuity this represents. It suggests that Roman conquest didn't erase indigenous knowledge systems. It drove them underground, where they persisted in secret, passed down through generations, encoded in objects like the dodecahedron that could hide in plain sight, mistaken for mere curiosities by the conquering culture. The silence of the institutions. And here we arrive at the heart of the matter. Why has this extraordinary evidence been met with such resistance, such deliberate minimization by mainstream archaeology? Because accepting the dodecahedron as a ritual object, as evidence of a sophisticated pre-Roman knowledge system that survived Roman domination, requires us to completely rethink our triumphalist narrative of classical civilization. We're taught to see Rome as the pinnacle of ancient achievement, the civilization that brought order, rationality, and progress to barbarian Europe. The dodecahedron tells a different story. It speaks of indigenous European cultures with their own profound understanding of geometry, astronomy, and consciousness. It suggests that what Rome encountered on its frontiers wasn't primitive barbarism, but sophisticated spiritual traditions that Rome couldn't comprehend and therefore had to suppress. This is the pattern we see repeated throughout history. The knowledge keepers, the wisdom traditions that don't fit the approved narrative, they get marginalized, dismissed, erased from the historical record. And when physical evidence emerges that contradicts the official story, when objects like the dodecahedron refuse to conform to our tidy categories, the academic establishment has two choices: genuinely investigate and possibly overturn cherished assumptions, or minimize and ignore. They chose silence. They chose to let these objects gather dust in museum storage, labeled as curiosities of unknown function. Because to truly engage with what the dodecahedron represents would require acknowledging that ancient Europe possessed knowledge systems Rome never understood, spiritual technologies that we in our modern rationalist age have completely forgotten. It would require admitting that conquest doesn't equal cultural superiority, that the victors who write the history books aren't always the most advanced, and that profound wisdom can be preserved in the margins, waiting for those brave enough to look beyond institutional dogma. The Roman dodecahedron is more than a mystery. It's a key to recovering lost dimensions of human consciousness, a bridge to ancestral knowledge that challenges everything we think we know about the ancient world. And that, friends, is precisely why they tried to silence it.